In November of 1964, Barry Goldwater lost the presidential election by one of the largest margins anyone had ever seen. He carried 6 states. Lyndon Johnson took the other 44, along with 61% of the popular vote, and every serious political writer in the country agreed that American conservatism was finished. The strange part is what happened next. Over the following 16 years, the losing side of that election slowly took over the Republican Party, and the way they did it still shapes American politics today. If you want to understand why the party fights with itself the way it does, why the base distrusts its own leadership, where the money machinery and the ground game actually came from, you have to start with Goldwater. He was a department store owner before he was anything else. His grandfather, a Jewish peddler, came into the Arizona territory with nothing and built the family business in Phoenix, and Barry ran it for years before he ever held office. He integrated his own stores. He helped desegregate the Arizona Air National Guard before the federal government desegregated the military, and he belonged to the Phoenix chapter of the NAACP. He was also famously blunt. He said whatever he believed about 4 seconds after thinking it, and his staff spent their careers living with the fallout. In 1960, a short book appeared under his name called The Conscience of a Conservative. The argument fit in 100 pages. The federal government had grown far past what the Constitution allowed, and neither party would admit it. At the time, both parties had settled into the same comfortable post-war consensus. Keep the New Deal, keep the alliances, manage the government you inherited. Washington ignored the book completely. It sold 3.5 million copies anyway, mostly hand-to-hand on college campuses. There was an audience for this argument, and it was far bigger than anyone in either party realized. What turned that audience into a political force was a man most people have never heard of. F. Clifton White, a political organizer from New York, had noticed something about how nominations really worked. Convention delegates were chosen in thousands of small local meetings that hardly anyone bothered to attend. Starting in 1961 from a rented office in Manhattan, he spent 3 years quietly filling those rooms with volunteers who believed in Goldwater's ideas. Precinct chairs, county committees, state conventions. The party establishment controlled the money in the newspapers and never saw it coming, because nobody important goes to a Tuesday night precinct meeting. By the time Goldwater agreed to run, reluctantly after Kennedy's assassination had already made the race unwinnable for any Republican, White had essentially banked hundreds of delegates for him. Goldwater knew he was going to lose. He ran anyway, because by then, the campaign belonged to a movement more than a man. And every ground game in modern American politics, in both parties, descends from that operation. Then, in June of '64, Goldwater cast the vote that still defines his reputation. He voted against the Civil Rights Act. His objection was constitutional. 2 provisions, he argued, gave Washington authority over private business that it had never been granted, and given his personal record on race, plenty of historians take the reasoning seriously. It also did enormous and permanent damage. Martin Luther King said the vote gave comfort to racists, whatever Goldwater intended, and segregationists attached themselves to his campaign from that day forward. He'd said he would rather be right than president. He got that wish. And whether he was right is a question people are still arguing about 60 years later. The convention that July was the ugliest the party has ever held. Nelson Rockefeller, the establishment's champion, stood at the podium for 5 minutes while his own party booed him on live television. And when Goldwater accepted the nomination, he answered 3 years of being called an extremist with the most famous sentence of his career. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. His delegates stood on their chairs. Everyone else in America understood the general election was already over. Johnson's campaign buried him. The famous Daisy ad, a little girl counting flower petals while a nuclear countdown takes over, aired exactly once as a paid spot, and every news program in the country replayed it for free. In November, Goldwater carried Arizona and 5 states in the Deep South, and that should have been the end of the story. 2 things kept it from ending there. The first was a list. 27 million people had voted for Goldwater in the middle of a landslide against him, and a young fundraiser named Richard Vigoury wanted to find them again. He went down to the Public Records Office and copied out the names and addresses of more than 12,000 Goldwater donors, by hand. From that list, he built a direct mail operation that could raise money for conservative causes without asking the party's permission. The movement's own donors, on file, reachable, forever. Most of the conservative fundraising world that exists today grew out of that one handwritten list. The second was a speech. A week before the election, the campaign bought 30 minutes of television for a 53-year-old actor who had never held public office to make the case for Goldwater. Ronald Reagan called it a time for choosing. It raised roughly $1 million, which no single broadcast had ever done, and it made him a national political figure overnight. 2 years later, he was governor of California. In 1980, He won the presidency carrying 44 states, the same number Goldwater had lost, running on ideas that had barely moved since the conscience of a conservative. America heard the same message twice, 16 years apart. The second messenger knew how to smile while delivering it. And this is Goldwater's real legacy, the fault line. 1964 was the first time a party's base organized against its own establishment and won. That fight never stopped. Reagan challenged a sitting Republican president in '76. The Tea Party went to war with its own leadership in 2010. Trump ran against the entire party apparatus in 2016 and took it over completely. Each round is the same collision between people who believe a party exists to win elections and people who believe it exists to stand for something. Even the people connect. A 12-year-old who pinned on a Goldwater button in 1964 grew up to be Roger Stone, the operative who spent decades pushing Donald Trump toward the White House. And one of Goldwater's teenage door knockers from the Chicago suburbs grew up to be Hillary Clinton. That's a strange sentence to say out loud, and it's true. Goldwater lived long enough to complicate his own legend. By the 1990s, the man once called the most dangerous reactionary in America was defending abortion rights and arguing that gay soldiers should serve openly, and the movement he started had mostly stopped listening to him. He died in 1998, but the machinery his defeat built, the lists, the ground game, the conviction that the base can simply walk in and take the party, that never went anywhere. He lost 44 states, and depending on how you count, he's been winning ever since. If this kind of history is your thing, subscribing is free and it tells me to make more of these. I'm Michael. Thanks for listening.